We all need to work together to get the bioeconomy on the agenda of the G7 for 2025, which Canada is hosting.
Hey folks, Flo here at Scaling Up 2024 with none other than the chairman and founder, Jeff Passmore. Jeff, the first question I want to ask you, since you basically just closed off the conference, what's your single biggest takeaway?
Carbon intensity and the fact that everything's going to be based on your carbon intensity number going forward. And you know, for many, many years, at least 8 or 10, I've been talking about how Canada needs a national bioeconomy strategy like about 35 other countries in the world have. I'm almost wondering if history has passed that by now, because what we really probably need is a national low carbon strategy. And notice I'm not saying a national low carbon energy strategy, but a national low carbon strategy. In other words, beyond energy. Okay. And that way we can compare all the, whether we're comparing wind with biochemicals, with textiles, whatever, but based on its carbon intensity. And that's how we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that was a message that came up and down, on many of the panels.
Okay. This was year number 8?
9.
9.
Yeah.
Incredible. Next year will be 10.
Yeah,
a
unbelievable.
Milestone.
Yeah.
How much do you feel has been accomplished over that period in the industrial bioeconomy versus, challenges remaining?
You asked me that question last year, and I keep on telling you, and I mean, it's not your fault, but I wish more had happened in the last 12 months. I mean, it would be nice to. Now, having said that, there hasn't been that much going on necessarily in Canada, but there has been stuff going on internationally. For example, last year, Italy hosted the G7, and they put the bioeconomy on the agenda. Well, in 2025, Canada is hosting the G7, and Italy and other G7 member countries, all of whom, by the way, have national bioeconomy strategies, are hoping that Canada will then continue that and get it on the agenda. So I view that as one of my missions, if you will, for 2025, is to make sure that the bioeconomy is on the agenda for the G7, which is going to be in Kananaskis in 2025.
Okay, Alberta, lots of biomass in Alberta, of course.
Yeah. Well, people probably don't even realize, but Alberta is 60% covered in forest. And Alberta is 1.5 times the size of Germany. I mean, we have so much feedstock in North America, and it's interesting. One of the comments that was made by Jerry Ostheimer, who is the manager of the Clean Energy Ministerial BioFuture platform. And he was saying, if you look at the Western Hemisphere, so North America and South America, we have so much biomass compared to what Europe has. And so, if we could get aligned, even North America and South America, on what life cycle analysis we're going to use to determine what the carbon intensity is, because everybody's using different models. And the problem with using different models is that then you come up with different results.
Different models and different jargon, even.
Yeah, well, even different
terminology,
jargon.
Let's say.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, we can't even agree on a definition of sustainability, but which is why greenwashing is so easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off message there, but I think carbon intensity is what is the benchmark for the future. It would make it really easy for governments when it came to making policy decisions if they just compared all of the options in front of them based on their greenhouse gas, life cycle greenhouse gas emission reductions, carbon intensity, and now, of course, politics would ultimately interfere with that, but at least you'd have a basis for then making decisions. You might have to make exceptions based on, employment in some area or, economic opportunities, whatever, in Atlantic Canada or Western Canada, but at least you'd have a basis for making decisions that wasn't just ad hoc. Yeah. And by the way, government should not be picking winners anyway. The role of government would be to, we're going to have, everything's based on its carbon intensity, and then the market will decide which technologies go ahead and which don't. Government shouldn't be picking winners.
You kind of set me up for asking you a question about Donald Trump, because that's kind of a Republican value, I suppose, right? To get out of the way and to just, make it as easy as possible for people to just build and grow businesses. I've asked a number of interviewees today and other delegates their feelings about that, and I feel like it's not as one-sided as I thought it would be. I feel like some people still have some hope that actually it might in some ways benefit Canada, whether directly or indirectly.
I'm not sure the extent to which it's going to benefit Canada, that I think remains to be seen. But what I will say is that if you overlook President-elect Donald Trump's character flaws, and just think about the policies that he's talking about, then some of those aren't wacko.
Okay, example.
You know, well, I mean, just what I just said. Let's let the market make some of the decisions about what goes ahead and what doesn't.
Right.
Now, of course, having said that, he's already sort of picking winners in the sense that he's saying, you know, we're going to drill more for
Drill,
fossil
baby,
fuel.
drill.
Yeah, drill, baby, drill. So, you know, and I have no idea whether he knows anything about the bioeconomy, but I can tell you who does know about the bioeconomy are a lot of the Midwestern states and state governors who voted for him, you know, the populations that voted for Trump. I mean, he carried practically every state, you know, so they are getting a lot of economic benefit from bioeconomy. And in fact, there are all the border states, the U.S. border states along the 49th parallel line, bordering obviously with Ontario and Quebec. I heard a statistic that there's 11 million Americans, between 9 and 11 million Americans that wake up every morning whose jobs depend on exports to Canada. So, you know, that this whole trade barrier thing is, it's going to be interesting whether somebody's going to say to him, excuse me, President Trump, but do you realize this is killing American jobs and driving up, increasing inflation and driving up the cost of goods in the U.S.? I don't know whether he cares about that, but my point really just was, if you overlook his character flaws and all the other things that are wrong with Donald Trump, then
it might not be as bad.
It might not be quite as bad as, and that's why people. Ultimately, that's how he won the election. People overlooked his character flaws.
Yeah.
They just asked themselves a simple question: do I feel better off now than I felt 4 years ago? No, I don't feel better off. So I don't care about the rest of
That's
it.
pretty simple in that sense.
Yeah.
Let's travel now from the United States to Finland. You received the Agriculture Minister of Finland, which I think is quite impressive in and of itself, to come to Canada to speak about the bioeconomy. What did your audience, your guest here today, learn about Finland that they may not have known? Perhaps you did. But.
Well, her title is Minister of Agriculture and Forestry.
Right.
And so, you know, she's got both portfolios. And actually, in a private conversation that we had on Monday evening over dinner, she said this was something quite new for Finland and a lesson to be learned by other countries, which is to say, you rarely hear about agriculture and forestry being in the same ministry. And, you know, like in Canada, obviously it isn't. You know, Agriculture Canada deals with agriculture and Natural Resources Canada deals with forestry.
Yeah.
And sometimes you wonder whether never the twain shall meet. But and of course, what else we learned from her is that Finland has had a national bioeconomy for many years. I think they're on their second or third version of updating it. And one of the statements that she made, which really struck me, was she said there is not a family in Finland that isn't touched by forestry. And not necessarily that every one of the members of the family work in forestry. Many do, but not everybody. But they start teaching about forestry in elementary school to the children. So they all grow up with an understanding of forestry and a respect and a love for forestry, but also an understanding of forest management and how, if you're going to manage your forest properly, you have to cut down trees.
Yeah.
And that was another message that we heard from from Lacey Rose.
Yeah.
You know, we had the county forester for Renfrew County, which, by the way, is the biggest county in Ontario, and they've got, you know, crown land, they've got private land that is covered in forests. And Lacey, who describes herself as a sort of a reformed eco-terrorist, you know, she always used to tell, when she was growing up, her dad, you know, she always would tell her father, you can't cut down trees. And now she understands that forest management includes harvesting trees, because guess what? Young trees need light and space in order to grow. And as they grow, they absorb way more carbon than mature trees absorb. Not to mention the fact that, as Lacey pointed out, mature trees, you know, maybe after 200 years they die. And then they fall over and they start emitting all that carbon. Well, now why not harvest them and turn them into wood products, mass timber, lumber, whatever, that then will store that carbon for hundreds of years.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I was actually going to ask you about technology. Is there any technology, any innovation, anything that, you know, came out this year that you're particularly excited about within this quite diverse sector that is the bioeconomy, if we can call it a sector?
You know, it wasn't so much technology, because unlike some of the previous years where we had like probably 2 full panels of people talking about their technology,
Right.
This year we had, you know, sprinkled one here, one there.
Yeah.
But what struck me more this year was more of the conversation about feedstock, and not just the conventional feedstock that we would think about. So, okay, forestry is a feedstock, agriculture residue is a feedstock, but we had people who came and spoke to us from California about dedicated grasses, crops that could be planted specifically for feedstock for the bioeconomy. And then today we had a speaker on invasive species, which is something that nobody's counting. And she pointed out invasive species cause forest fires, they cause disease like tick-borne diseases, and she went all through a whole bunch of health issues and how, for example, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has something they call their billion-ton study, and they've identified 1.3 billion tons of biomass available in the United States, but they haven't included invasive species yet. So that's a whole other area. And when you think about Jordan Solomon from EcoStrat, who's trying to identify what they call bioeconomy development opportunity zones, well, all of a sudden, here's a whole new area in XYZ county that's got invasive species that we can include in that available feedstock assessment.
Yeah. We interviewed him as well, by the way, so if you are watching this video, make sure to check out Jordan's interview as well as, I think, 14 others that we've done. If you missed the event, it's a great way to, get some of the insights anyway. I want to wrap up on a couple of, personal questions, legacy questions. I mean, next year will be 10 years of scaling up. First off, what keeps you still motivated? As you said, there are probably some frustrations that come along, not just with having to plan and organize an event like this, which you do with your lovely wife, Eva, masterfully, but it is a lot of work, but also just frustrations with maybe the pace of progress, as you said earlier.
Yeah, I don't think I'm just an ultimate optimist, and so I don't really think about things are going so slowly. I just keep thinking about, well, listen, we are making progress, even if it's incremental. Incremental change is better than no change at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, actually, my wife said this morning when we woke up, and she was saying, well, we're almost, to the end of this year. She said it's a little bit like going to the dentist. You don't want to, like it or not, you got to go once a year.
Yeah.
So, but for me, it's a labor of love. I mean, I really do. Listen, what else am I going to do?
It gives you purpose.
It gives me purpose. I mean, I heard a really good expression, I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I heard a really good expression the other day, entrepreneurs never retire. And so it gives me purpose. It's, as I say, a labor of love. I'm passionate about the environment and the bioeconomy and the fact that it can create jobs at the same time as it helps us, meet our obligations with respect to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So, and I have 7 grandchildren. And so you're thinking about, okay, what legacy are you going to leave them? And you want to, I love the people who think about, well, we have to leave the world a better place than we found it. And I'm not sure we're doing that yet. So let's, continue to work on that.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on almost a decade, and it's very impressive, and I think everyone in this room respects you greatly for it. What do you think, though, is the legacy of scaling up right now? If it stopped right now, if this was the last, what has it actually accomplished that can be measured or at least in some form, kind of assessed?
I think what it accomplishes every year is networking. I mean, it's wonderful to have speakers. I mean, you can't just have people come and sit in the room. So people get up and speak, and then after they've spoken, the people in the audience come and talk to them. And so I think the legacy would be the connections that people have made. Even today, we had a guy get up and talk about how he makes something called bio-ink, bio-based ink. And so it's no hydrocarbons, no fossil fuels in the ink, and it's actually cheaper than fossil-based ink is. And so for printing, whatever, pictures or newspapers or whatever, and one of the guys that was sitting in the audience is a capital provider, and as soon as that guy got down from, or Francais, from out of the University of Laval, by the way, and as
where
soon
you
as,
studied?
and as soon as he sat down, the CEO and founder of Or Francais, he sat down, and the guy from Front Funder came up, and they started talking about how can we collaborate. So that even if scaling up never happened again, those kinds of connections that have been made over the last 9 years continue.
Okay, great. Look, I mean, there's many things I'd like to ask you. Is there anything that we haven't discussed? Is there a message that you'd like to pass on as for anyone who watches this video online in the coming weeks?
We all need to work together to get the bioeconomy on the agenda of the G7 for 2025, which Canada is hosting. That, the more people that hear about this, one of my frustrations is that we don't seem to have penetrated the political class to the extent that I would like to. Although I have to say, we had an Ontario minister here from, the provincial government. So Premier Ford's Minister of Forestry and Forest was here, and he didn't just come and speak. He sat in this room for a day and a half and listened to all the presentations. That's very unusual for a minister to do that. Especially he had to come from Toronto. He's not an Ottawa-based minister, but guess what? He's based in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And so Thunder Bay is surrounded by forests. All that northwestern Ontario is forestry. So he sat here and listened and thought, when I talked to him yesterday evening at the Scotch tasting, and I said, you might want to think about having a provincial bioeconomy strategy and not wait for Ottawa or the feds. He said, we're not going to wait for the feds to do anything. We're looking at what we can do just as a province. So that was good news. So a little bit of progress there.
And that is maybe also one of Scaling Up's legacy is growing attendance by governments year after year. That must be something that you are happy about.
I was very happy. This year we had, I think, 9 federal departments, about 50 to 60 public servants attended, and then we also had Business Development Bank of Canada, Export Development Canada, and we had representatives from 5 provincial governments. Actually, interesting, right from working from west. So BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. We also had the city of Trois-Rivières, and because the Trois-Rivières in Quebec wants to establish itself as a center for the bioeconomy. And then we had New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. So it was a good provincial representation as well as federal.
And as we said, Finland, Los Angeles. I mean, that's pretty impressive. What's next year's theme? Or you don't know yet?
Yes, I do know. You know what? It's funny. My head is so full, but it's focusing again on decarbonization. Accelerating deep decarbonization is what our theme is next year. So it's a little bit of a continuation of this year's theme about delivering low carbon intensity. But what I want to now is focus on not just delivering, but accelerating deep decarbonization. So we got to get decarbonized, and we got to do it faster.
You've heard it, folks. Thank you very much, Jeff. Always a pleasure. Congratulations for
everything. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.